which every Thursday will occur right here at 26 2nd Avenue in New York City, downtown Manhattan. So this particular series, or this slot on Thursdays that will happen from 7 to about 8:30, this slot will happen every Thursday, and it's called What's Up With That? And we hope to feature various kinds of unusual phenomenon, and we want to as well give a sense of how the ancient Vedic system viewed some of these things. We'll look at these items from various different perspectives, and in this way, our first series in the What's Up With That slot on Thursday will be a series that we are inaugurating the whole setup today with a series called Reincarnation. And we're going to discuss what reincarnation is, how it works, the mechanisms by which it happens, is there any evidence of it, and we'll look at some special cases of various people who have had experience with reincarnation. They remember past lives, or under certain circumstances, they remember past lives. And we'll look also at the kind of research that's being done in academic institutions. It may come as a surprise to some people that reincarnation is actually being researched in the University of Virginia and some other universities in the United States as well. And maybe it's happening in Europe or other countries as well, but I'm not aware of it. So reincarnation is a fascinating subject. It's the basic idea of how it is, or how it exactly works, that a particular individual at the time of death leaves a particular body and then winds up later, after the death experience, in another body, somewhere else, with another name, maybe somewhere quite remote. And what are the possibilities that can happen with reincarnation? We'll also look at the idea of reincarnation as it relates to various philosophical streams. We'll talk about reincarnation as it's seen in various religions. Particularly, we'll look at reincarnation the way it's being seen in Christianity, because it has a long history in Christianity. And it might come also as a surprise to some that reincarnation has not always been completely forbidden in the practice of Christianity, that there were at times people who taught the process of reincarnation even within the Christian tradition. All right, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the practicalities. We'll talk about case histories. And today, as our first element, our first introduction to the whole concept of reincarnation, we are going to discuss the evidences. Because many times people just assume that reincarnation, like many philosophical ideas, is just one of those ideas. You know, somebody says, "Oh, I believe in it," but ha 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 ha. How do we know that they actually know anything? How can we prove it? How can we prove somebody was a reincarnation of somebody else? Well, the fact is, of course, that in a certain manner of speaking, we cannot prove that somebody is a reincarnation of somebody else. However, although it's not possible to prove reincarnation, it's not possible to absolutely disprove it. Now, once we get past the notion of proof, let's talk about evidence. Proof and evidence are closely related, but there is plenty of evidence for reincarnation. There's plenty of evidence for it. So we should examine this evidence and discover whether this evidence is plausible. Can we believe these accounts that we are hearing and seeing? These accounts that have been put forward by some researchers and, of course, by individuals. No one will doubt that in any type of investigation, especially paranormal investigation, there are certainly people who are trying to make a buck. and they're putting forward misleading arguments or creating some kind of theater to hoodwink people into believing something and thereby make some cash off it. That's always there, but that isn't just in the paranormal. That exists throughout our whole culture. So certainly that is there, but because there are people like that does not mean that everyone who's researching reincarnation is a person who is of some kind of dubious character. And another point that I want to make is that there are certain scientific types who will just throw the idea completely out the window as, oh, this is not scientific. But at the same time, they will not give any exact reason why they consider reincarnation unscientific. So when there's evidence for something and a person refuses even to look at that evidence, can that be called scientific? So we need to actually look at the evidence and see if that evidence is reasonable. And as one researcher will say, we'll look through many different researchers in our investigation of our trip through reincarnation, which we have about, I think, 4 or 5 episodes so far. It may grow to more episodes than that. But as we go down through time, through these various episodes, we'll look at various researchers and investigators and what they have to say. And one gives a simple explanation that it's far more reasonable to believe in reincarnation than it is to reject it. So it's far more reasonable to believe in reincarnation than to reject it. Now, why should we say that? So let's talk about some of the interesting things that make reincarnation plausible. What should we look at? We're going to look in more detail at some of these things in a later session. Today is just really an introduction to the idea of reincarnation. But first of all, we have, I think, one of those strongest evidences is the evidence of little children. And these little children spontaneously remember the events of a previous life. Why should they remember the events of a previous life if there is no such thing? Now, of course, everyone knows well children make up things. That doesn't take a genius or a PhD to understand that simple fact. But although children do make up things, because children are children, they do not actually understand how the world works. They're unable to make up good, plausible stories, as any mother or father knows when a child is lying. Oftentimes, the child will say things that are completely unbelievable. So as a result, you can, understand as an adult that the way the child is describing things could not possibly have happened. And immediately, the child is trying to pull one over on you. So, if a child can make up a story about a person in a past life, and that past life is plausible, and more than that, you can go in the accounts of that past life and recognize that the details of that past life can be checked against the historical account of that past life of that person. And those two things actually connect with one another, that the account of past life by the little child, and at the same time, the real facts, the everyday facts of that past life, recalled by the people who were relatives that are still living, or by historical records or public accounts. If these things can be corroborated, then this is strong evidence. It's not weak evidence at all. We have to come up with some other reason how a child could have detailed information about the life of an older person somewhere else in a different circumstance. And not only information, but detailed information that fits together, makes sense, and doesn't seem like a tall tale told by a young child. There was one researcher, and we'll be looking at his work quite closely. His name is Ian Stevenson. And Ian Stevenson was in the University of Virginia. I believe he was a psychologist by profession or by his training. And later, he got very, very interested in this notion of reincarnation and does it exist. And he felt that, like any other scientific topic, that investigating reincarnation could be done. So he did exactly that. He set up a research institute in the University of Virginia and began to investigate children's accounts of past lives. Of course, he began this investigation in India. But, as time went on, people were accusing him, saying, well, naturally in India, where people teach the concept of reincarnation, then you're going to find children who will talk about this, and, they'll be taken seriously. But this doesn't happen in other countries. So we said, all right, and he went to Europe, and then he went to America, and we discovered that these things do happen in Europe, and they happen in America. And the notion of children talking about a previous life happens in many places. And so this is one of our strong points of evidence for reincarnation. We have to ask the question, how can the small child understand, know details of someone else's life? Someone else's life that occurred at an earlier time in some other place in the world, usually. And the child doesn't just know, he knows details. The child oftentimes, in the accounts that he and Stevenson drew together, he drew together many accounts, over a couple, 3,000 of such accounts. Now there's a Jim Tucker who's continuing the research that he and Stevenson started. And now there's over 5,000 accounts. So these are not just, one thing shot in the dark, once in a blue moon kind of thing. And it's true that most people do not remember their past lives. But at the same time, there are those who seem to remember not only a past life, but a great amount of detail of that past life. And sometimes they remember technical details that it appears a child should not be aware of. How would a child know technical details about some classification of things? Like, we're going to look in a few minutes at the story of James Leninger, which is presented here. And this can be seen on the internet, this story of James Leninger. And he was a young boy who was born to a couple of parents, Bruce and Adrian, or I think, I've forgotten what her name was. And he had a fascination with airplanes. There was nothing strange there. But eventually it became obvious that he knew a lot about airplanes. Not just a little bit, but a lot. And then he had these recurring nightmares of having died in the World War II, having been shot down in a bombing attack on Chichijima in Japan. So this little boy claims he has died in the crash of a Corsair aircraft into the waters around Chichijima, Japan. And he kept this nightmare kept reoccurring and reoccurring. Of course, the mother tended to believe what the child was saying. The father was very skeptical, as we'll see here. And the father, to make himself convinced that what the child was saying was indeed high nonsense, he researched what the child was saying, thinking that it would be easy to disprove everything that the child was saying by just finding out the actual details. It's easy enough to do research on the internet about World War II. So we began to do that, and to his surprise, instead of debunking the child's story, everything that he tried to find out about the child's story tended to line up with reality, and that began to worry him. And so we'll see a little bit about this story. And this brings us to exactly why we are using this idea of accounts of small children. Because sometimes adults also remember past lives. But of course an adult can go to the internet and pull together a group of stories and claim to have been that person, that no one would be surprised But actually, to see a small child be able to give a plausible, detailed account of the past life of someone that he obviously never met, that is strong evidence. And to just ignore that evidence and say that it must be some kind of hocus pocus is just not science. That's the only thing you can say about it, is that if someone refuses to look at any evidence or simply rejects it out of hand, that person is just prejudiced. He's not scientific. And of course, there is a lot of prejudice in science, and there's prejudice in every field of human activity. But if we look at these things coolly and we look at them in a simple way, we begin to see that there's far more evidence for reincarnation than anyone might have thought. And of course, if we talk about this historically, we go back some years, we discover that at one time a good portion of the world believed in reincarnation. Only about a couple of millennia ago did people begin to try to reject the idea of reincarnation. But, of course, that's another story. Without the principle of reincarnation, it's very, very difficult to describe a reasonable picture of the world we live in and describe God in a way that doesn't make him out to be irrational or malevolent. Because we look all around and we see some children born in very wealthy families. We also see children born in poverty-stricken families. We see children born in situations where they have very powerful bodies, and even from a very early age they start training for some kind of physical event. And on the other side of the coin, we see children born who are defective in their bodily configuration, and they have to have interventive surgery or some other kind of thing to help them get through the early stages of life, and some never even complete that. We see some people have long and healthy lives. We see some people have lives that never get off the ground. They die at 2 or 3 years old. We see that some children are born into religious families where they're given religious training, and from an early age they have a sense of the Creator. They have a sense of wanting to see things from the perspective of a servant of the great Creator of the entire universe, while other children are born to atheistic families, and such children are discouraged from any such belief. So we think of what kind of capricious God would just throw the dice and let one child come out in one kind of circumstance, another child come out in another circumstance. This question has no answer unless we answer it with reincarnation. So I'll take a break here, and we will take a look at this little blurb from the Leninger family, Bruce and Adriana Leninger, and this is also on the internet, so I'm not sure whether I'm going to include this piece in the video on YouTube, because it's already on YouTube and you can see it. I will include in the notes below a URL for where you can see this. And actually, if you just look up James Leninger, you'll see a number of things, because he has become one of the poster boys for reincarnation, our new way of looking at things. So I'm going to roll this little section here, and then we'll discuss some more afterwards.
James M. Leininger, a young boy from the Bayou.
Whoa! There's something in the eyes. It's undeniable.
That's not all they share.
Somehow James Houston's spirit has affected my son, either through reincarnation. I don't know how it happened.
I can beat the Japanese easy as pie.
Initially, what caught my attention was James's extreme fascination with airplanes.
And every night he slept with his G.I. Joe action figures, which he named.
I took him to the Kavanaugh Flight Museum.
Here's home video. While the other kids casually look at the plane, 2-year-old James seems to inspect it. Watch as he checks the underbelly, then climbs inside, donning the headset.
The pilot put them on?
I said, oh, look, there's a bomb on the bottom. He said, that's not a bomb, that's a drop tank.
Bouncing about in the cockpit, James was flying high. That night, their world would change forever.
He started having the nightmares, and that was my first indication that there was something wrong. It was a panic-stricken, terrorized screaming.
Over and over again, James had the same terrible nightmare, 4 to 5 times a week. He was too young to explain the dream, but he could draw.
Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs.
Help me.
He would just be crying. He'd say, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. He laid on his back and kicked up at the ceiling, and he goes, Mama, the little man's going like this. And he laid on his back and kicked his feet up. The little man's going, ooh, 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 can't get out. And I said, well, who's the little man, baby? And he goes, me. I thought Bruce and I were just gonna faint.
They questioned, what kind of plane?
Corsair.
Why did your airplane crash?
My plane was shot down.
Who shot your plane?
He looked at me like I was a village idiot. He said,
The Japanese. I kept thinking, where is he getting this? I was a stay-at-home mom, so I know that there wasn't anything that he was being exposed to.
Not exposed to in this life, but perhaps, just maybe, somebody else was. Decades earlier, James Houston grew up with the same insatiable fascination with airplanes. He became a naval fighter pilot and fought in World War II. March 3rd, 1945, during a mission near Iwo Jima, he took a direct hit. At age 21, was declared missing and presumed dead.
where did he take off from a boat?
Do you remember the name of your boat? He said, Natoma.
Found several thousand hits on the word Natoma.
The USS Natoma Bay launched into battle, headed for Iwo Jima in the fight for Lady Gulf.
It's the biggest naval battle in the history of the world.
Leo Pyatt served on the ship. From his home in Ohio, he organizes the Natoma Bay reunions. That's how Bruce found him.
I wanted to disprove it.
He asked a few questions about, did I know some of the people? Oh yeah, I remember those people. And so he got very quiet.
It was all real. The people and places James described actually existed. And remember those G.I. Joe dolls that James named? Turns out 3 men with the same names, first and last, served on the Natoma and were killed in action. James said they greeted him in heaven after his crash.
I'd always asked him, do you remember what your name was? And he always said James. But his name is James.
Yes, there was a Jim Houston, a rather large shell. Just hit him in the engine and it burst into flames and went down.
They showed Leo the drawings.
He was right on the nose. I'm sure, in my mind, that he was there.
Leo invited James, now 3, to the reunion. James recognized several pilots, even called them by name.
You're Bob Greenwald. I'm serious.
He'd never met Bob Greenwald.
No, he'd never met him before.
And someone else was invited. James Houston's sister, Ann.
And he goes, it's not Ann, it's Annie. She wasn't my oldest sister. I had an older sister than that. And I said, you did? Who was that? And he goes, Ruth. I mean Ruth.
Eddie is what they called me when I was little. Knowing my name and my sister's name, things that my brother did when he was a kid. It's too amazing to describe how he would feel that way, but he does. He considers me his sister.
But does she consider James her brother?
I think it's probably a reincarnation of my brother.
Anne was so touched, she gave James items from her brother's final effects.
The little George Washington bust had been on my brother's desk all through school.
I said, where's the statue? He said, I put it on my desk.
As James gets older, his memories of James Houston and the nightmares are beginning to fade. But his knowledge of airplanes and his passion for flying continues to soar.
The Corsair was my favorite fighter. The Corsair was fast. Agility was very good.
Why him?
James has never said anything about why he's here.
One of God's unexplained mysteries.
Suzanne Stratford, Fox 8 News.
Okay, so that's a kind of little interlude there. This is the story of James Leninger and his fascination with airplanes and his detailed knowledge of airplanes and his detailed knowledge of World War II, especially a certain part of the theater of combat. And these things, how could a little boy get such knowledge? That's why we're for instance, this is why Ian Stevenson, you can also Google his name, Ian Stevenson, felt the importance of trying to understand children's accounts, because he felt that a child could not pull together a plausible story that would hold scrutiny. Older people could possibly do that if they were very skillful. So when Ian Stevenson was investigating these various accounts of children's experiences of their remembrance of past lives, he particularly worked with a certain class of smaller children. And he would try to see, and he did a lot of things because, to make a good scientific investigation, you have to rule some things out. You have to be very careful. Oftentimes when people hear accounts like the Leninger account, people will think that if he's making this up, that he's going to be coached by some adult on what to say. And so therefore, to be coached by an adult, the child would look for clues, or sometimes they say that the investigator, by asking questions in a certain way, is leading the child to certain conclusions, that the child is just sort of passively flowing with the investigator's stream of questioning, and apparently he's describing a previous life. So these are the kind of things that have to be carefully understood and avoided when making a presentation or making an investigation into the recollections of a young child about past life. And so there are many children who have experienced this phenomenon, and in the many cases that Ian Stevenson had investigated, and his later protege, Jim Tucker, we discovered that oftentimes the children who remember past life are children who have died violently or have been murdered in a past life. And that's what kind of sets this phenomenon apart from the phenomenon of ordinary death. And so in this case, we see that oftentimes the child has some motivation or some idea of finishing up some type of business that was left over from the past life. Another interesting phenomenon is the phenomenon of the birthmarks that are left behind in the child. So sometimes when children are born, they have some birthmark, and when we learn what their past life account was, we see that the birthmark coincides with the marks of death in the previous life. Like sometimes we see that there was a recollection of having been shot in the head, and there's a circular birthmark at some place on the head, and in the back of the head there's a much larger one, as a bullet would make. As it goes in the head, it's a small hole, and as it comes out, it's mushroomed, and therefore takes out a whole section of the head things seem strange, and they're very compelling evidence, and to come up with a counter explanation would be very difficult. In fact, actually, the only way you could come up with some reasonable counter explanations are usually to resort to other paranormal phenomena. They're either using telepathy, or that they're able to remember things, or they're able to remote view, or something like that. So these explanations are also quite unusual. So reincarnation is certainly the simplest, most plausible explanation. They claim to be reincarnation. They claim to know details. Those details are easy to corroborate. So this is, as we say, strong evidence. Some people will never accept, because for them this is impossible. And so we see that in the world, as they say, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. But is this the only kind of evidence? We will also be looking at other types of evidence, because sometimes we see that an adult will be hypnotized into a regression, what we call a hypnotic regression, into their past. And so they go to childhood, and sometimes when people are hypnotized, they go before their childhood, to their infancy, to even a previous life. And sometimes in a previous life, they were in another country. And sometimes in these hypnotic regressions, they actually speak a foreign language that when they are in their waking state, they don't remember. They have never spoken that language. So how does someone regress through hypnosis into a previous life in a different country, no details, and on top of it, speak a foreign language, suddenly, inexplicably? So this is another category of evidence for reincarnation. Of course, the idea is, in the Vedic literature, that there is a essence, a subtle body. There is a soul, but right now we're talking about the subtle body, in which the soul is inside the subtle body. The subtle body is a mechanism that goes from one life to another. And so these out-of-the-body experiences are another example of good evidence for reincarnation, because people do have out-of-the-body experiences. So we have an experience out of the body. If we're out of the body, then we must not be the body. And if we're out of the body, there must be some part of the self that exists apart from the body. So what is that? And of course, this ties into the phenomenon of ghosts and astral travel, and also the ability to be, through hypnosis, traveled to either a past or a distant location, or both. So this is another strong evidence of reincarnation. Yet another evidence is the idea of phobias. We know people have sometimes very, very strong fears, irrational fears, of sometimes things that they've never even encountered in this life in any kind of negative way. Some people have irrational fears of spiders, or fire, or heights, or airplanes, or a number of different things, dogs. So where are these fears coming from? Why does someone have this visceral fear of something that generally they're not in contact with? And even if they know, they find it hard not to have their heartbeat rise and their emotions become disturbed when they're in the presence of this fear-producing thing. So this phenomenon of being able to speak a foreign language suddenly and inexplicably, these are all various things that are pieces of the puzzle that are answered by the concept of reincarnation. So, as I'm saying, join with us, and over the next few weeks, I'm not going to do absolutely every week on reincarnation, but the reincarnation series will have about 4, maybe 5 or 6 parts to it. We'll discuss, as I said, the history, some details details, these researchers, the institutions that they work for, how reincarnation has been treated by Christianity and other religious groups, how it fits into philosophy, and some related phenomenon. We will deal with all these kinds of things. But in between the sessions about reincarnation, we may also speak about other topics, which will be part of our larger What's Up With That series. So we hope you'll join us. And if you live in New York City, come on down. It's 7 to 8:30, 26 2nd Avenue, Manhattan. So every Thursday, this will be the slot and the place. Otherwise, watch us on YouTube. Thank you very much.